Have you ever just wanted to give up? As a mental health counselor and also with friends over the years when I was counseling them, there's so often times in our lives when we just don't want to fight anymore. It isn't that we actually don't want to live. It is that we cannot see a way out of the situation and circumstances that we are presently in. And in that situation, when we feel that there isn't a direction to turn in or a course that we can take, a direction that will help us to improve our lives, in those times, in those scenarios, we just want to give up. Like you, I'm a fighter. You know what I mean. You and I, we overcome so much, don't we? The tragedies that we went through when we were children, different occurrences in our lives when things were so difficult, and yet somehow, in some way, you and I garnered the strength to find a way out and continue with our life in a way that was right for us. But sometimes there are junctures where it just all seems like too much. And I was at a point in my life when I felt just that way. I had done so much in my life. I went to undergrad school, electronic commerce school. I traveled. I went to Mexico and had friends there. I climbed the pyramids. I went to Europe and saw the Swiss Alps and so much beauty that's in the world. I helped a lot of people by God's grace through counseling, and I added a lot of good to the world. But I came to a place in my life where none of that mattered anymore. I was married to a man who I thought then was the love of my life. He was a considerable bit older than me, which made him protective of me, and that made me feel safe and loved. But over the years, safety and security turned into control, and then, unfortunately, into abuse. The abuse was very psychological and tore me down to a point where I just didn't want to go on anymore. From outside appearances, all was going well. I had a good job, I had a cute dog, and we appeared to be the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, it was a total nightmare. And so I made a plan to take my own life. It was cumulative, everything I had gone through growing up when I was a little girl, terrible things that had just happened over the years, and eventually in my marriage at that time, I just couldn't fight anymore. I didn't see a reason to fight. Do you know what I mean? When you get to that juncture where you just don't want to try that hard anymore to make your own life work. You just can't see a reason to do so. And my only worry at the time was, when I die, who will take care of my dog? As odd as that may sound, because I didn't have children, I was worried for my dog and her welfare. I would say the only place that the man I was married to had done what was right was that he loved my dog. So I knew, as much as she would miss me, that somehow God would see to it that she was taken care of when I was gone. So I made a plan. I decided to take an overdose, and I planned to do it while my husband was at work. I worked in the daytime for an internet startup company, and he worked at night, so I knew if I planned it properly that by the time he got home from work, I would be long gone. And I was relieved because I would get to be with God and not be in this world anymore that I just couldn't find my way in. So when my husband went to work one afternoon, I took hundreds of pills. And because I timed it in a way that I wouldn't be found by the time he came home from his shift, it was too late. He found me in a coma on the floor, and I was taken to the emergency room. It really wasn't humanly possible that my body was still alive in any way because I had taken so many pills. But God had a different plan than mine, and as a result, I ended up in a coma on life support. The doctors told my mom and dad that my brain was completely destroyed, as was my liver, and that I wouldn't come out of the coma. But even if by a miracle I did, that I would have to be put away for the rest of my life because I would be what they called a human vegetable, that I wouldn't be able to function in any way on my own. While all that was occurring in this earthly realm, my body on a hospital bed attached to machines that made me swallow and made me breathe, I left my body. I rose up above it, and I could see the nurses tending to my body. I could see my body laying there, but I wasn't in her anymore. And then the best that ever happened to me occurred. Have you ever met God? I did. I have a saying which is, whether or not people believe in God doesn't change that God exists. And whether or not people believe in God does not change that when they die, they will meet their Maker. And indeed, I met my Maker. There isn't anything in this world that compares to being in the presence of God. I had climbed the pyramids in Mexico. I had seen the Swiss Alps. I had driven across the United States. I'd lived in a redwood forest in California. I'd certainly seen a lot of beauty in my life and magnificence, but nothing compares to being in the presence of God. There was light brighter than anything that exists on this earth plane, and a beauty, a warmth, and a comfort that truly there are not words to express how magnanimous that feeling was. To be at one with your Creator, no recollection of any pain or discomfort, no harsh memories, just peace and love. But there isn't a word that can describe how that felt. It was like floating in perfection. And so there I was, able to see down upon my body, knowing I had left her, and now I was in the presence of the greatest light and beauty and magnificence that could possibly ever be. And so I dwelled there with God for 3 days. My body was on life support, and I was with my Maker. I remember so clearly that I wanted to stay with God forever. I didn't remember what life was like on earth, but what I did know is being in the presence of God, I felt complete, fully complete, and loved beyond every measure possible. And so that was where I wanted to be. I was happy, I was relieved, I was peaceful, I was content, and I knew that I wanted to stay there with God forever. I was able to see the nurses tending to my body and the doctors speaking to my parents about making a decision to unplug the machines, because there wasn't a reason for my body to stay anymore. It had been completely destroyed and was not functional. At the end of the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. I thought I was with God forever now, and everything would be right forevermore. But then God looked me in the eyes and asked me a question. He said, "My daughter, what do you want to do?" And when you're in the presence of God, you know what he means. I knew he was asking me, do I want to stay with him, or do I want to go back into that body, laying on a hospital bed, back to earth, back to the life I had been living? And with all of my heart and soul and all that I am, I wanted to stay with him. But I answered, there is work to do. And in that moment, I heard 2 nurses that were tending to my body scream and say, "She opened her eyes, she opened her eyes." And there I was, no longer in the presence of my Maker, but back inside my little war-torn body. I would like to tell you that everything got better after that, but actually it got much worse. I had a lot of years after that that were really difficult, and eventually was able to extricate myself from the marriage and start a new life. But spending those 3 days with God has changed me. I always had great faith since I was a little girl, because things were so hard when I was growing up, and because I never fit in. Life just didn't make sense to me, and I didn't want to do or have what most people wanted to do or have. And so therefore, my faith in God from the time I was a little girl was always very strong. And to this day, I cannot definitively tell you why I said to God, there's work to be done, but I just have to assume that whatever I'm doing day by day is the work he needs done. Maybe you've always felt like you just don't fit in this world. And most likely you've had times when you just didn't want to carry on anymore. I understand. So many of us want the world to be all that we know it's meant to be, for the animals, for the earth, for other people, and we hold that dream in our heart. And when we look out at the world and it doesn't match with what we know is the way it should be, it can be so disheartening. But my beautiful friends, I want to encourage you that your life has a specific purpose, and with your beautiful soul, along with all the others that have faith in the goodness that we know should reign and rule over this world, we together, by not giving up and instead pressing forward, we truly can create a world that is beautiful and supportive of all that is. I hope my message helped your heart, soul, and mind. And please remember, if you have a moment when you feel so alone, I really do love you, and so does our God. Thank you for listening.